Hello and welcome to Connect. I'm your host, Randy Shavilo. On today's show, we'll feature Jordan DeLorme, the general manager of the Roxy Theatre, who will talk to us a little bit about the theater's 90th anniversary celebrations. As always, we'd like to connect with you. Follow us on Facebook to watch new and past interviews or email us at connectyxe@gmail.com. The Roxy Theatre was built in 1929 and 30, and it opened August 29th, 1930, 90 years ago. And we have Jordan DeLorme, the general manager for the Roxy Theatre, with us today. Jordan, with the Roxy Theatre and Magic Lantern Theatres, thanks for taking some time out of that busy schedule, even with COVID, to come and talk to us today.
Yeah, it kind of is a busy schedule. We've got a lot going on. As you mentioned, it's the 90th anniversary this month. So we've got a big treat for people coming up here at the end of the month, Randy.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the theater and how it got its start being built in the late 20s, or around the eve of the Depression. So it opened in 1930. Can you give us some sense about the air conditioning that it was touted to have and things of that nature? A very turn of the century, forward-thinking theater built for its time.
Well, as is touted often, the Roxy was the first commercial building, the first venue building in Saskatoon that had air conditioning. And of course, there's an artesian well in the basement, and the artesian well fed the air conditioner. So you got a nice, cool, humid air conditioning in the theater. So it's always been air conditioned, and that's why on all the old pictures of the marquee and everything, you always see stuff like, sensational air production or cool inside, or we make our own weather, because that was really something that the Roxy, back when it was first built and first opened, really marketed, was the fact that it had air conditioning. And of course, it's one of the last atmospheric theaters in all of Canada, or in Western Canada, which is shown by the sky-like ceiling. And of course, it's got the twinkling stars and all sorts of other charm, sort of the Spanish courtyard, Spanish villa ambiance.
Right, interesting that even when we look at the Spanish influence with the architecture on 20th Street and the Little Chief Station, also with that influence in the architecture, the last of its kind west of Ontario, uh, it went through a number of changes up until probably about 1995 or so, when it closed. Uh, it had theater attendance, and it was a real hub for the city, not just the neighborhood. What are you seeing today with right, and we're into the COVID era, if you will, but what are you seeing with the way the theater use has come to evolve with things like the weddings and an event center like it is?
Well, evolve is a good word to use because, of course, the Roxy was built as a cinema. What a lot of people don't realize was that it was not built and opened as a silent film theater. When the Roxy opened in 1930, it opened as a talkie theater. It was wired for sound. And I mean, its primary use today is still as a cinema. But of course, we've done, renovations and added lights and extended the stage, to make it more of a multi-purpose venue. So of course we have concerts once in a while, a lot of lectures. Companies use it for their annual general meetings and different daytime meetings, and of course weddings are a big thing here. People love using it for their wedding ceremonies if they want an alternative to something like a traditional church. And I've had people do all sorts of cool movie-related stuff with their weddings ceremonies. I've had Star Wars themed weddings with images on the screen, or bits of video during their wedding. I've even had people have fireworks show up on the screen once they're announced. You know, so lots of different fun things that people are able to do at the Roxy. And of course, we have a lot of fun usually every year doing our silent film event, which at this point is unfortunately going to be postponed, I think, until 2021 now, with the decrease in capacity and the inability at the moment to do live stuff and make it viable, I suppose, with the drop in capacity and everything. But
I see what, yeah, I see what we're doing with some of the incentives, both, another significant cinematic production and maybe viewing facility like the Broadway Theatre and the Roxy. These are two gems that we hold dear in Saskatoon. And I always refer to the old Roxy as a place where I grew up, and many of our parents and grandparents over 90 years have taken their kids and grandkids. And even with things like, I'm going to bring it up for my buddy David Curtin, who was a member of the Mickey Mouse Club that many people were part of. As a hub in the community, what do you see with, there's probably about 400 or 500 seats in the theater that it can accommodate on a given full day?
yeah, well, the theater's got currently 474 seats, so almost a 500-person capacity. Of course, seats are a lot wider now than they used to be. People have just generally gotten bigger. Theaters care a little bit more about their customers coming in and being comfortable and having leg room and whatnot. But if you think about when the theater first opened in 1930, the seats were a lot narrower. There wasn't as much leg room. For people that have been in the theater, if you look all the way to the back, where the projection booth is now, there was even less room in the projection booth. The seats went back a little bit further up on the. I'm thinking it would be the east side of the back of the theater. Went all the way to the back to the outside wall of the theater, and then of course on the west back wall of the theater there was a crying room for moms that had babies that were crying. They could go in. It was soundproof. Like I said, when it opened, it was wired for sound, so they were able to put something in like a soundproof room that you could hear through the speakers, but nobody could hear you and if your baby was crying, you could sit in there and watch the movie through the glass. And then up at the front of the theater, the rows went a little bit closer to the stage. And like I said, it was always a cinema when it was built. It didn't open as a silent film theater, so there wasn't an organ and there wasn't really an orchestra pit. There's sort of the base for what could have been an orchestra pit under the floor. That it sort of seems like they started to build an orchestra pit, but then realized it wasn't going to be a silent film theater and just built over it. So there's sort of some neat, if you do some crawling around under the floor and whatnot, there's some neat things to see down there. In the old air conditioning return vents and everything that come up through the floor, there's a lot of neat stuff back there. But I mean, you think the theater almost seats 500 people now, and it's the biggest, dedicated cinema room in Saskatoon as far as seating capacity goes. And when it opened, it would have had, 700 or 800 seats in it. And you think about that it was sold out often, and the population would have been way, way smaller at the time because that was the only thing to do.
What happened with the change we initiated? I think it was the silent movie pictures with the symphony and live music, and it morphed into maybe a more successful program now with the silent film that you brought in, along with live music scores and with live music with rock bands and so on. Tell me about how that came to be, because that's taken off quite wildly.
Yeah, so well, we had been doing Silence is Golden for several years with the symphony, and those were relatively successful. We'd always have good crowds, but of course, the production to do that is extremely expensive, because then you have 20 musicians, and then somebody's got to write the score, and then you have to have the score adapted for the size of the orchestra that's going to play and everything, and it's a big production. And what we decided to do around Halloween was we approached the the local band Shooting Guns and said, would you guys be interested in doing, if we went and got an old horror film like Nosferatu, would you guys be interested in doing a score with it? And right away they were like, oh yeah, that sounds like a great idea. So they did that. We played the movie. They wrote all the music, performed it live, and it was a huge success. And we've just been doing that every year now. So, the year after we did it with Mahogany Frog, who's actually a band from Winnipeg, but they have a lot of local roots. And then the year after we did a screening of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde with New Jacobin Club. And then the most recent one was Haxan or The Witch with the score done by the Garys. And, the really neat thing about this whole event is that, we're trying to go and handpick these bands, and they really make it their own, and they write all the music, and then they start going and they do other venues and tour to other cities and take these on the road. It's really a part of each of these bands' repertoire now, which I think is a really neat thing that it's evolved like that. But of course, to have a band of somewhere between 3 to 6 members, write a rock score using more contemporary instruments, and it's not as big a production as using an entire symphony. And I think that's what's helped it be a little bit more successful. The fact it's not really the classic way of showing a silent film, but it's unique. And when we have done it, we tend to sort of have the premiere performance, which I think is
well, the sold out capacity of that theater is becoming evident with the success of that. We're just going to kind of close out here, but tell us what's happening with your initiative for the 90th anniversary on the 29th.
So for the 90th anniversary of the theater on the 29th of August, we're going to be holding a 7:00 performance of Hell's Angels, starring Jean Harlow. Of course, it was a great pick. It did come out in 1930. It came out in November. I'm not entirely sure when it played at the Roxy, but it came out in November of 1930. Stars Jean Harlow. Of course, it's a war epic directed by Howard Hughes. And a lot of people think, there's a lot of famous photos of the marquee of the theater that say, Jean Harlow, Hell's Angels on them. If you go and eat breakfast at the Park Cafe, there's a bunch that are blown up there that were taken from the library archives. And the coolest thing about this event is that we're even going to throw back on the admission. If you want to see Hell's Angels at the Roxy, August 29th, 7:00, it's open to all ages. We're charging 10 cents for adults, 5 cents for children. First come, first serve. Of course, very limited capacity, because capacity is just lower right now. I think we've got about 137 seats that we can open up with responsible physical distancing and everything. And I think it's something that we've been talking about doing for a long time, and we weren't sure if we were going to be able to do it because of all this. But we found the rights to the film, we made it happen, and I think we're going to have a lot of fun with it.
That sounds great, Jordan. I want to thank you for all of your many years of GM, and shout out as well to Tom Hutchinson and Magic Theaters for saving our gem in Riversdale and Saskatoon. So we look forward to seeing you. Congratulations on the 90th. Thank you for all you're doing for the community.
Well, people keep coming, and we'll get to that 100 in 10 years as well. So just keep coming, and we'll keep playing movies.
That's our show for today. I'd like to thank our guest, Jordan Delorme from the Roxy Theatre. I want to thank all of you for watching. I'm your host, Randy Shabala. We'll see you next time on Connect.